Welcome to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. This podcast is all about conversations about healing and rising from the ashes of your grief and trauma. In this podcast, we will be deconstructing and highlighting the different aspects of grief and loss. I'm your host, Dr. Christina Zampatella. Welcome to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. I am looking forward to working with Goemaat-Suarez. She's got a really long last name. I can only say the last part of it. But we're here with Kate Suarez to talk about what exactly is a stillbirth doula. And so, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Tell us just a little bit about who you are, what your background is, and what do you do?
Okay. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker, but one of my passions is being a stillbirth doula, which we're going to talk about what that is. I was a birth doula for like 10 years before becoming a full-time therapist. I work in a large hospital system, and that has given me the opportunity to experience like supporting families as a doula when I'm not working as an employee there, and then on the other side as an employee. So there's a lot wrapped up in that. I went to Simmons University for my MSW, and I interned with the Center for Women's Emotional Wellness. So that kind of also got me into pregnancy, postpartum, and with my stillbirth doula background, a lot of focus on loss and grief.
So it sounds like this has been a passion of yours for quite a while, and you kind of grew into this, maybe even unexpectedly.
Yeah.
So this wasn't the original plan.
No.
Okay.
It's odd, right? We don't know why we fall into the things we fall into. But yeah, my initial interest was being a birth doula and a childbirth educator, and a fellow doula and I started a business that she still runs. And as I worked as a doula, I realized like there is a whole nother side to this. Like you'll have clients, they hire you, and then they end up having a miscarriage, or they have trouble getting pregnant, or they have a stillbirth. And being at a specific, very high-risk situation kind of made me realize like, at first it was like, I need to be prepared if something happens, like an unexpected fetal demise. And so we'll talk about the stillbirth training, but as I got into it, I realized like, oh my gosh, there's people who need this support from the jump. Like it's not, they know we're not going to have a happy ending here. Like, and they need as much support as someone who's anticipating a live birth of a healthy baby. And as I went through the training, I kind of was like, well, this is kind of like, I kind of want to focus on this because nobody wants to focus on that, right? And I don't know, I just became really good with grieving parents who've lost a baby, and who knows why a person is good at that. But yeah, it just kind of became a passion of mine. And I kind of want to spread the word because I no longer do that work so much since I'm busy in like regular life. But it's so important.
Yeah, it
it's
sure
so
is.
important.
I remember the first time I heard the term doula, and I was like, I have no idea what the heck that means. So let me ask can you define what doula means?
So the word itself, there's like some controversy on where it actually originated, but it means things like sometimes like servant of, or walks alongside, or assists. And so the idea of like an anything doula is someone who supports you like emotionally, psychologically, physically, like in labor. And we always joke like when we are like having life crises, like, where's my life doula? I need a life doula.
I want a life doula.
Yeah, I need one.
So, okay, there is a good question. What's the distinction between a doula and a therapist?
I mean, actually, it's a super good question, because I think that being a doula like was the best like experience for becoming a therapist that I could ever have. I mean, doulas have trainings and certifications. As a therapist, you have to go through a lot more schoolwork, internships, et cetera. But what's actually kind of nice about being a doula is like there are much looser, I hate to say looser boundaries, but like you are there for the family. Like a lot of times families like think of you as part of the family afterwards. Like you're not bound by this, I have to keep this like distance. Like you're there to be like down in the grit and the, whether it's the beauty, the horror with the family. So it's like completely different in a way, but also a person who makes a good doula will make a good therapist and vice versa.
Gotcha. So it's like you're companioning people
Exactly.
through these transitions of life and death
Yes, yes, precisely.
versus a life doula that I want that's going to help me figure out why did I choose to stop drinking caffeine? Like,
Right.
whose brilliant idea?
Exactly.
My doctor looked at me and said, "Are you crazy?" I was like, "Well, you
Like,
should
are
be
you
glad."
trying to
Right?
make life
Are you trying to be
hard?
right? Exactly. So thank you, because I think that term doula, to be honest with you, I've heard more death doula that you hear a lot through like hospice organizations,
Yep.
and then birth doula that you hear. I've actually heard more about like that when people are having like a home birth.
Yeah.
When there's a midwife, and so they have a birth. Like those are the terms like when I originally
Yeah.
think of doula. And then when I met you and you said stillbirth doula, I was like, what the heck?
that?
And I've been in this field for 20 years. It's amazing.
Right?
So can you share with us what a day in what a day in the life of a stillbirth doula might look like?
So one thing about being any type of doula that I think is like one of the most important things is is like continuity of care. Like you are there with the family and it is you. Like they have chosen you. You may be there for like 2 days, like if you're providing like prenatal doula, like support education, you're with them while they're pregnant. If you're with them throughout, that could be any amount of time. You'll visit their house afterwards. So
you'll actually go to their home.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's not just in the hospital.
Right, yeah.
Okay, and you can be with them from the very beginning of the. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
So I'll use someone with a fatal diagnosis as an example. A family may hire a birth doula and then learn that their baby is likely not going to survive after birth. It could be any fatal diagnosis. It could be one where they can donate part of their baby's body to help others. So they have the choice, like, do I want to do an elective termination? Do I want to carry to term? If they decide to carry to term, that's a whole different doula experience that you need. So that is when you find, if your birth doula is not a stillbirth doula, because you can plan what you want it to be like. You can plan to still have the joyous moments of, is your baby going to have a few breaths? Maybe. You still get to meet your baby. Like all of those things are still true. All of those things are still happening. And to have someone with you who's like planning that with you is really important, because to everyone else, everyone who knows, they're like expecting this like horrific event. And why would you want to pick the music? And why would you want to, have this detail? Or why is this important? Because it is, because this is the birth of your baby, even if they never take a breath or they only take a few. So then usually in that case, labor would be induced. So you'd go with them to the hospital, kind of hang out for a while, hang with the family, see what they need.
Like in the room?
In the room.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Doulas often go in and out, like family needs some time, family needs doula back, like sneak into the waiting room, take a nap, like, and then be there throughout the labor and delivery. When mom is delivering a baby that they know will not survive long, like the pushing phase is really, really hard. So that's when having a doula, like doing anything that somebody comforting would do, right? Like giving you a washcloth, touching your hair, like rubbing your back, telling you like you've got this, like just all that stuff, like in a moment that would be like really happy and exciting for people anticipating a live birth. Whereas the energy is different in the room. So like a stillbirth doula helps still be like, I'm here, we're having a birth, like this is your baby's birthday, like this is what we're doing.
What a big word. This is your baby's birthday.
Yeah, and people don't think of it that way. They really don't.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah, it's just, oh my gosh, there's so much, right? People will wonder, well, why are you bothering? Why are you carrying the baby to term? Well, first of all, that's the family's decision. And they see it as like this negative. They see it as like the death, like, but it's the birthday first, right? Even if your baby dies in utero and is born deceased, this is still a day that they made it from inside you to the outside world. And that is something to be celebrated no matter what. And it is just hard for a lot of people to comprehend that. Like, they only focus on the sadness, and it is devastating. And there's a lot of crying, and as there should be, right? But let's not forget, like, the parts that are beautiful and having those memories. And then afterwards, the doula will sometimes, like, either the doula or the nurse or together, will swaddle the baby. Sometimes parents will want their baby to have a bath, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just want them to be like just wrapped up and kind of maybe hidden, depending on how the baby looks. Depending on how long baby has been deceased in utero, they can look a little, they look a little rough. Like, sometimes their head is kind of misshapen, skin can be sloughing off. There'll be a lot of discoloration, like dark bruising.
Wow.
Some parents would like to see as little of that as possible. Others want to see, like, I want to see what my baby looks like. I want all the memories. I know. So we help with that. It's learning to bathe a baby that's deceased or get a baby dressed that's deceased is like a skill that you have to learn. That's like very hard, like super just difficult because they're tiny and not that movable, and you have that I'm gonna break this baby thing in your head, like. And also just psychologically, it's like, it's not the easiest thing, and it's certainly not for everyone.
Yeah.
But like, for parents, when they see someone look at their baby who objectively looks pretty rough, and they see that the doula thinks their baby's beautiful, that for parents is like such a gift. Like, for people to just see your baby as a baby and not like a dead person is like so important. And who thinks about these things, right? Nobody. But
we don't talk about this.
No.
When I found out what you did, and then we started talking about all of the details of like what that is, it's like, we already don't talk about grief. We already don't talk about death. But stillbirth death? Are you kidding me? That's like way in the, it's like the little, the shoved into the corner of society. You said something, I've got a question for you. You said, this is a day that should be celebrated. What if the family doesn't want to?
And that's up to them.
Yeah.
So and a doula for anything is like, our job is to it's basically like, well, what does the family want? What does the parent want? We're here to support that. If they want a shroud and they want silence and they want all the windows closed, like, then we do that. Like, however they want to make the birth, make the experience, whatever's right for them is what the doula helps to do.
How do you figure that out?
By like talking to them, having conversations. So, because there's kind of like two different situations. There's like the fatal diagnoses where it's coming for a while and you have time to plan. There's we just found out at our 36-week ultrasound that there's no heartbeat. And that, I'll get to in a minute. And then there's we're at the hospital and just had an unexpected demise. So for the last two, that's when, and even at larger hospital systems who've been told these things, you call the stillbirth doulas in the community that and you see who's available. That's like a thing that can be done when you have an unexpected or when a family comes in. That step is skipped 99.5% of the time.
Why?
I have no idea.
Do they just not know?
I think that has to be it, because I have told like many providers about it, right? But I think when and to no fault of their own, like providers get into the rhythm of what they do and how they do it every time, and they just kind of go on like autopilot. So, and I mean, my organization has tried to make that more known of like, here's, you call this number, like whoever's available will come out when they can. Like we have one in like Sussex County, nobody knows that. And we don't have a like a call schedule, like an organized call schedule. We probably would if we were getting calls the way we should be. But for example, if someone notified me from the hospital and it was like 3 a.m, like I have a real job, right? But then that would be okay, I'm going to the hospital, to this family, and I will be back, not sure when. Should definitely like let you know, they're free. You don't pay for a stillbirth doula. Like it's not, you don't, if you hire a birth doula and however their services may change, that's kind of between them. For me, I don't like to add insult to injury. Yeah. Like we were going to be doing this anyway, so I'm not going to like I don't care if you're millionaires. I'm not going to take your money for this. So that's when like that's where it gets missed a lot of the time, of like this family is now going in to an induction maybe like 48 hours from now, maybe 24 hours from now. So then there's this part where you wait, where you go home by yourself or with your partner. You might have little kids there, your mom might be staying with you in anticipation of the baby coming. Oh my goodness. And then you're like pregnant, but the baby's not alive. And you have to like have that fun psychological meltdown in your head. Right. And who anywhere knows how to help you with that? No one. No one. So that's when it would be helpful to know like, hey, there's a stillbirth doula out there who can come to your house, kind of get you settled and tell you what to expect tomorrow. You know, like the doctors will tell you, but you need like psychological preparation.
Yeah, the psychological preparation that often gets overlooked in the medical system terribly anyway. And I'm thinking, like you're talking and I've got like a million questions, a million ideas.
I know, because I just keep talking.
Yeah, no, you're great. I am absolutely fascinated. And there's not a doubt in my mind that our viewers and our listeners are going, what the heck? I had no idea. Maybe I could have, that would have been helpful for me, or that might be helpful for somebody that I know. But I'm also thinking about like single moms who have absolutely no support system. Yeah. And here they are. Yeah, I mean, people from all walks of life, but low socioeconomic status that aren't getting the services that they need, that are completely overlooked and disenfranchised, which was disenfranchised grief was a previous podcast that we have. So when you hear me use the term disenfranchised, my encouragement is to go back and watch that episode on disenfranchised grief. Just saying.
It's a good one.
It's a good one. Thank you. But to completely just not even validate that experience, especially if the person, I imagine, tell me if I'm wrong, but if you have somebody who is already conflicted about whether or not that they wanted to have a child, or how about, and like I said, I got a million questions. How about a person who was going to be giving up their baby for adoption, and now you've got that. Like I'm thinking of somebody I know who, and this is this different situation, but it was terrible. But I know of somebody who was pregnant. The entire like adoption process was all all planned right from the hospital, and then they found out that the baby was biracial, and they rejected the baby because they were told that the baby was Caucasian, and they sent the baby home with that mother who was completely unprepared. There was like, who do you go to? Who do you go to for that? And she had a very, very small support system. And then finally another family stepped up very, very quickly who had already adopted a biracial child. And so, this was, for them, this was like, oh, thank goodness, this is really going to be a good thing. But I'm thinking of all these situations in which people are not given the psychological support that they need when it's not this And, I had a baby shower.
Right.
You know what I mean? We had the sex of the child announced. We had names.
All
We
that.
had the nursery's been put together. Now what am I going to do with that room? Am I going to bury this child? Is this child going to be cremated? What are my cultural beliefs? What are my religious beliefs? Sorry, I'm going on and on because I'm just like, these are all the things, right?
That you have to think about, and it's like you all of a sudden have to think about them all at once when you're like devastated. Or, for example, like with the adoption example, like birth mom was not ready. And like, so it's kind of like, I mean, first you're dealing with the rejection, like all of that. And likely, like she may have labored alone. You know what I mean? Like, and there's adoption doulas whose job is to be there with a
There are adoption doulas?
Well, there are adoption doulas who are actually like for the adoption, but then there's doulas who are with birth moms who are like planning on placing their baby for adoption. So they may not have anybody know that they're pregnant and they're delivering and they've got their adoption plan all set up and they're gonna walk out of the hospital and just I worked at an open adoption agency for a little bit.
Oh, okay.
And so I did have the honor of doing that. So yeah, it's like all these kinds of like different types of loss because an adoption is still a loss,
It's
right?
very much so.
Like even
we
though,
actually had an episode of adoption as a loss.
Oh, good.
Not to as part of the. I know. There's a lot of bases to cover in this. So yeah, you're 100% right, and I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah, and then so I kind of like totally got off track, but like being able to be there for a mom, for example, who is going to be blamed for what happened, right? Maybe she's struggling with substance abuse and the baby passes in utero. Well, we all know what everybody's going to say about that, even if it can't be medically proven. Like, so we still have to, be kind people and offer birth mom help and support in labor. Like she's a human like anybody else. Yeah. So there's like so many reasons why people would need or want a stillbirth doula. And the interesting thing is because people don't know about it, even if it's offered to them, they're like, what is that? Like, I don't want that. I don't want anybody else in the room because they don't know what it means to have a stillbirth doula in the room. Because nobody becomes a stillbirth doula because they're like, ew, or oh, that's sad and scary.
Well, you're not part of the family, and
yeah,
this is a very intimate moment. It might be one, like you said, there might be shame that's latched onto it, or there might be questions about,
like everything. What happened? What happened? What did you do?
And who are you to be, putting a cold washcloth on my face right now? I don't even know who you are, depending on when you came into that family's life.
Yeah, and so it is like, it is helpful to be able to plan with the family when they know like things may not go well, because sometimes like you have high risk pregnancy, right, where you're hoping for a good outcome and a good outcome is possible, but not likely, and then it's like, well, do we let the uncertainty like take away our hope and like joy and the pregnancy? A stillbirth doula can help talk to you about that. Like all those things that we just don't think about because oh my gosh, the way you see pregnancy in our culture is like, oh, it's happy, it's joyous, it's baby showers, it's this, it's bliss, it's heterosexual couple, it's like our vision is just, and that's almost nobody's experience. So having, I think, especially when things are going to go really the way that nobody wanted them to go, having someone who's educated and supportive and just complete non-judgmental, like, I'm just here for you to help you through this.
Now, would you step in as well if the child had some form of deformity or medical issue that that the child would be born with, but is not necessarily a stillbirth? Would that be a role that you would play, or is that a whole different kind of doula?
For sure, we do like that. We do that training as well, like NICU training, basically, because like some babies are like might be headed to the NICU or definitely headed to the NICU, and like that's something to process, right? Like if you know they're coming in to immediately intubate your baby right after delivery, like that's a lot to process. That's like scary. And then they take the baby away and you're like, so, and especially because, you know, neonatal intensive care means things like, you know, your baby's not guaranteed to survive or needs like a lot of help. So that means you as a parent need a lot of support. And there is like a mourning in not being able to have that hold your baby right away, skin to skin. Like you may not be able to touch your baby for days or weeks.
Oh my,
like
I can't even imagine.
And that in and of itself is like, that kind of like disconnect is very hard to cope with. And after like birth mom is healthy, like she goes home and then she's home with no baby. And whether that's because baby's in the NICU or baby passed, like now you've got the nursery, you've got the phone calls, people don't know, you've got the things coming in the mail and like your email, like everything is flooding you with, you have a healthy live baby. And it's like, no, you don't. So stillbirth doulas, like the good thing about it being a doula is actually like, there's no real like time frame. Like you can do home visits throughout the, whatever they consider the postpartum period. Like,
so it doesn't just stop once the baby is born.
Yeah.
It can go on, and that is their choice as to when that ends.
Yeah. And sometimes, and these relationships kind of like just fade naturally, or like sometimes you're stillbirth doula is like hauling you into counseling because you won't do it because you don't want to, and you just want your doula to come over every day and talk to you. Like, but
so there's a level that's kind of takes us back to the beginning of this, where it was like, what's the difference between a doula and therapist? And somebody such as yourself who's been trained as both, that's got to be a hard line for you to walk, I imagine.
It is actually, because it's so easy to put on like therapist hat, right? So if I'm like at your house, like being your doula, it's like you can't help but like use like therapeutic techniques, and then I'm like, you need my doula self right now, and then we're gonna find you a therapist, like, because you need both. And then so it's like you don't want to use too much like therapist when you're doulaing, but like almost every like doula technique you can like use in therapy. You know what I mean? I think it always makes me think of like when I was saying like life doula, like, you know how way back in the day social workers, they like lived in the apartment buildings and they lived in the neighborhoods where they worked. It's more like being a doula is more like that. You're just like involved in like the daily life.
You're in the front line.
And the gritty. Yeah. And like, but that's where all the stuff happens.
Yeah.
That's where life, love, all of it happens. So
it's almost like it's like you fall in the category of first responder.
Kind of.
Which is another topic that we're going to be covering in these series of podcasts as first responders. But you are right there. You really are right there. How does somebody who may be interested in finding a stillbirth doula go about finding one, especially if where they're planning on giving birth is not saying, hey, by the way, this even exists.
Right.
But so our listeners, our viewers, you know, where would they want to go in order to find somebody such as yourself?
So the easiest thing to do is to go to stillbirthday.com. That's like the largest. Stillbirthday.com.
Okay. All spelled out.
Yeah, all spelled out. And that comes from the founder, Heidi Faith, whose like thing is like a pregnancy loss is still a birthday. Like it is still the birth of your baby. And that, like we were talking about, people always think of it as like a death day, but like, no, we have to remember that if culturally, if for this family, this is a birthday, then it's a birthday and we all have to like remember that.
Can it be both?
Right, exactly.
A birthday and a death day.
And in our next one, remind me to ask about, or to tell you about birth certificates.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, yes, and you can search by location. So, I mean, if you search Delaware, like 7 names come up. Mine is like 3 last names ago, but it says Kate Goemaat-Suarez, and then the certificate says Kate Brown, and it's like, but yes, all those are me.
But 8 in the entire state of Delaware. 8.
Yeah, and
That's
who
it.
knows that? But who knows there are any, right? Like, A, I feel like there should be more. B, nobody even knows there's any. And like, when I worked I did maternal child social work in a hospital, and I did like all of the bereavement for like stillbirth, families who experience that, miscarriage, and helping them, like kind of walking through like, how do you call a funeral home? How do you figure this out? What do they mean by disposition? What are they asking me? You know? And I was like, oh my gosh, thank God I'm a stillbirth doula, or I'd be like, I don't know, because nobody trains you on that. But it's very like, it's just a lot of support that families need that no one like wants to do, but is, I don't know, for me it's like really fulfilling, and it's like such an honor to be there during like that time in a family's life. So, but, and also as an aside, Stillbirth Day is who does the training. So like if you want to be a stillbirth doula, that's where you would go to kind of start your training.
What does that training look like? So the first takeaway we have here is that if you are looking for a stillbirth doula, that there is a location where people can go online, which is stillbirthday.com. And then if you want to become a stillbirth doula, they can go to the same website, right, to find out where the training is.
Yeah.
Can you help our viewers and listeners know kind of briefly what that training would look like?
So it's, I mean, post-COVID, almost everything's online, but it is online training meant to be completed within 12 weeks. And it includes all the basics you need to be like a birth doula, right? Because you do need to be able to do both. But there's a lot of focus on like like what types of losses, what they look like. You have to have a certain amount of medical knowledge, even though you're not making medical decisions or anything like that. What babies look like at every gestation when they're born. There's a lot of sort of psychological work you do with yourself to be ready to be a stillbirth doula. And that part is like huge. There's, I mean, like with anything, there's books you have to read. There's like little exams and reports on this. There's a community project that you have to do. Mine considered of identifying and speaking with funeral directors about like, what is the process for a stillborn baby? Is there a charge that's different? Yes, it is different. Like, you know what I mean? Like connecting with different funeral homes to see kind of what their policies were. And then when you talk to them, you just really get a sense like, you know what, I could send a family here. Like I could tell a family like, give this funeral home a call because they're going to like, you know, really take care of you and be kind and understanding, which you have to be in a funeral home, but a stillborn baby.
But they aren't always, because I used to be an adjunct professor in a master's of thanatology program. And one of the things I noticed is that some of the students who are funeral directors had literally no education about like really the grieving process and how to communicate with somebody who's just lost a loved one, who may not even have the capacity to like even make decisions, because you're so emotionally and just absolutely, your heart is wrenched and the loss is so intense that the idea of having to make decisions about, you know, whether or not you are going to be burying somebody or cremating somebody, or those decisions are so hard to make. And if you don't have enough social support to go through that,
oh, you can't. It's like impossible.
It's impossible. And so I noticed that when I was teaching in that program, how little education they were. Now it's gotten significantly better, because all of a sudden it's on the radar of like, who you can't do this without knowing how to do it. Exactly. So, but that was something that you became, and I'm looking forward to, like, we're going to record another episode here today. Looking forward to talking even more about that. What would be, okay, so, and then you do that, is there like a practicum somebody goes through? Like, do they have to go through a training outside of that 12-week training?
That's your 12-week training for like Stillbirth Day. For my organization, Birth in Full Bloom, that my partner now runs completely herself, like amazingly. When we hire a doula, like they have to do that just to be part of our organization. And then then they have to like work with me because I am the one who had the experience. The hardest part is there's very little like real time, hands-on experience that you can actually get because who wants a student in that situation, right?
Right.
So, but then I tell people like so much of this is just you going in there and you're there and your heart is in it and they can feel that you're there to support them and not judging, and they can feel that you don't think their baby's gross because that's something that they have. They have to battle with their own feelings of what their baby looks like. You know, like that alone is like a whole thing that, and just to see somebody else who doesn't think they're like bruised and like the macerated skin and you have to put different gauze and different pads and like to see somebody like gently holding your baby and like doing that stuff alone, like, and it's like you just have to be there.
Just
like,
love and compassion, and when you're feeling whatever that person is feeling. It just sounds like there is a huge range.
Yeah.
What some people must experience versus what other people must experience, and like everything in between.
Yeah.
So you having to adjust that accordingly based on what you're seeing with the family.
Yeah.
So wanting to normalize certain things, but also honor their boundaries, because they may reject the baby altogether, or they may want to be with the baby, and or you know anything in between, or they maybe change their mind, and you have to be or you may need to just sit in the room silently.
And sometimes that's all you need to do.
And sometimes that's so hard for people who are, you know, clinicians, and you know, clinicians, or the work that you do, or learning how to sit in silence can be rather overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, am I supposed to be doing something
like,
right
am
now?
I supposed
But
to
you
say
are.
something? Like, this is doing something.
Silence can be more powerful than a million empty words.
Yes,
Right?
I totally agree.
So I think it's really amazing that I just, I'm so glad to have, well, first of all, found you, and then also to have learned such an important role that's in the community that is so hidden. It's almost hidden in the field of thanatology, which is the study of death, loss, and grief.
That,
Like
it is.
When I went through my whole training, when I went through my whole certification, when I went through my fellowship and the exams that I took, they didn't teach us about stillbirth doulas.
And you think
not
about
even
it, and it's
of
like,
all the things.
why?
Why not?
Definitely a death as well as a birth.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, is it off the? It's so off the radar. What would be maybe a third takeaway for somebody who has experienced a stillbirth, is expecting they may, or they know somebody that may experience a stillbirth, or is just wondering a little bit more about what this might look like?
I mean, and I know I said this to you before, like, just tell everyone you know, if you listen, if you watch this, like, that a stillbirth doula is a thing. And that, because you never know who will need one. Like, someone is going to need one, and that person may be in your life, you know, and you would want to know if, like, they're going through something and they may need a stillbirth doula, and you're like, I listened to this podcast, like, 4 years ago, and I was like, what is that? And now my partner, my best friend, somebody is going through this. And I would also say, like, for all birth doulas, like, you have to do this training, you have to get some training in it, like, talk to somebody. If you're a doula long enough, you are going to, like, be at a birth that is an unexpected demise, or you may have a family want to hire you where they know the outcome could go well, could go poorly, anywhere in between. Do you say no to clients who you're not sure? You know, so I think everybody needs to be trained in this. Every doula needs to be trained in
and
this.
needs to have ability to consult
Yeah.
with
yeah.
somebody else who may have more experience than them, so they don't feel like they're just floundering out there.
Oh my
so
God, for sure.
finding,
I'm always open to talking to other doulas or anyone about it, because, like, as soon as I started to do it, I was like, this is a thing people need. Like, why are we not talking about this? And then there's the whole, oh, we don't want to scare moms, so we don't talk about alternate outcomes that do happen sometimes. Like, we still have to talk about these things. Like, so, I mean, it's like, in you were talking about in the other podcast, it's just so disenfranchised. Like, just over there. Like, you don't want to, yeah. But you don't get the support that you need when we're looking at it that way. So, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So much. What an important topic. I mean, this is like, it feels like a breakthrough topic. How long, I guess I have more questions. How long has this been available to people?
A while. So there are always going to be like birth doulas who are better in this situation than others, right? But until Heidi Faith started Stillbirth Day, which the year is escaping me, it was never like a big kind of centralized thing. There was never like one website where you could like go to and learn a lot of stuff. And Heidi's website definitely has parts of it that are like have a religious overtone, but there's plenty of like pieces that don't. And yeah, it just, I mean, even when I became a doula, I have like 3 different trainings, 2 other certifications, none of them like focused on it at all.
Wow.
Like, and so then at this point I'm
even
like,
in your field.
in our field.
Wow. Okay, so I got off topic. I'm so sorry. Again, well, no, I'm not sorry. I'm sorry, sorry, not sorry. But I really appreciate the time that you took with me today about this. So for those viewers or listeners who are interested in follow-up questions about stillbirth doula or anything about that, or any other questions you might have that you're interested that the Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z could be answered in a question and answer podcast, you can go to the Center for Grief and Trauma Therapy Facebook page, or you can, if you're watching this on YouTube, go under the YouTube episode and go ahead and place your question or comments down there, and I'll make sure that I attend to those. I do think that could be a really important resource for people who are looking to gather additional information, and I know how to track Kate down, so I can get additional information as a result of that. So thank you for watching and or listening, and in a future podcast, actually right now we're going to be recording reproductive loss, which is a massive topic, and we'll have lots of different types of reproductive loss that we'll be talking about. So hope to see you there, and thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for listening to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. If you found this podcast helpful, please share it, subscribe, and leave a rating or review wherever you get your podcasts. We want to be a resource for anyone who's experiencing loss, and this is a simple way you can help us spread the word. Check out our show description. There you'll find a link to connect with me on social media, as well as helpful articles and resources.